Table or truth?
Thank you for coming today.
Well, thank you.
Once again, it's been a pleasant week overall. Man, there's a lot.
All right. Well,
let's go into like what you're again. It's almost cliche to say there's a lot because there's always a lot. But
let's. One of the things that is a head scratcher for me that's current is all the protests throughout the United States and throughout places in the world, London and such.
Mm-hmm.
And I have no problem with the protests. Where I have a problem with is them blaming the United States for what's going on in Gaza.
Them being the general gist of the world's...
Yeah, they're pointing at the United States. They're demanding, of course, an immediate ceasefire and the release of all the hostages. United States...
Release of Hamas hostages? Or which hostages? Yeah. Israeli or Hamas?
No, the hostages that were captured by Hamas.
Oh, well, yeah. But then that would assume that Hamas is willing to comply for that, right?
Right, but it's not beyond that. It's, again, you want your ceasefire, you want Hamas to release all the hostages. This is your demand. And, London had, I don't know, tens of thousands of people out protesting. And they have a larger Muslim community than we do here. But again,
no doubt, keep an open and rational way of...
There's a lot of pointing at the United States.
Yeah,
that we control Israel or something, and that's bothersome for me.
Well, I don't blame you because you live in the United States, and so do I.
Well, no, when the United States is wrong, for instance, when we went into Iraq instead of taking care of business in Afghanistan, we were wrong, and I said it at the time. But again, what President Biden has called for is a temporary, I forgot what the term is, not a full ceasefire, but a suspension of activities in order to get humanitarian aid in and hopefully make some type of deal to get some hostages out at the same time.
Seems reasonable, right?
Right.
Okay.
Well, again, the protesters are not just blaming Israel for what's going on in Gaza; they're blaming the United States. So that's my problem. What do you think?
Let's explore. I'm not saying I agree with that, by the way, at all. But let's explore the nuances that have created that perception of reality with some of these individuals who are making these claims. In fact, I almost hesitate. But I almost want to maybe, if there's time, bring up a conversation I had with a friend. Once again, no names mentioned or anything, who's pro-Palestinian. Trying to understand the mind and the reasoning behind some of the justifications for that, right? In my gumshoe work here this week, it's funny because this really aligns with what you were talking about right now and you're sharing. A few questions to ponder that may help explain why this is all being perceived the way it is. First of all, this goes along with the idea of people in general. I'm going to call it out. It's our nature as humans to do this. Lazily not using better choice words. And when they say the United States, could it be that they are suggesting more the deep state, the quote-unquote deep state that I allude to all the time, the military-industrial complex, the lobbyists in Congress who kind of want to warmonger, and consequently the rest of us, we look bad. The rest of us natural, regular peons, if you will, in the U.S., who don't want a war. If we could avoid World War III, that's probably a better way to phrase it. We would, right? And it's a very complicated issue because obviously, as you know, nobody but the people that created this entire mess know exactly the absolute truth behind everybody's motives and everything. Okay, so here's some questions to ponder here, and let's see. You tell me what you think, right?
Sure.
All right. By the way, I have to say it. This is borrowing straight out of a guy that you're not necessarily, I think, a huge fan of, but to be fair, Russell Brand, right?
Oh, my God.
Okay, good old Russell Brand. And I...
Hold on, before you go there, let me make one more point on this. I didn't see all this protest when Russia was bombing civilian targets in Ukraine. I never saw all these,
all over the world.
No, I'm just talking about, well, let's just talk about the United States.
Right.
I can't control the rest of the world, but just the protests in the United States that we've been seeing going on, I didn't see any of that protest hit the street, again, with the bombing of civilian targets, hospitals, schools, etc., from Russia. But again, I don't want any killing.
Yeah.
And again, there's not enough fine tuning of separating with some of these protesters, Hamas from the Palestinians. Most of them say, again, we don't want to see Palestinian civilians killed in this, but it's war.
Yeah, and
then some tried to equate what happened on October 7th with what's going on now, and that's two different things. I look at October 7th was a terrorist attack where you had approximately 1,400 Israelis and others. It wasn't just Israelis. There were other foreigners who were indiscriminately killed one by one by Hamas, where this is a response to Hamas, which is a war, and they are attempting to target Hamas, which is embedded with civilians.
I tried to defend and explain my stance on being pro-Israel on this and during this whole conflict, not disregarding the obvious idiosyncrasies that are kind of highlighted by detractors of the Israeli government, who have said that Netanyahu is not the most saintly of prime ministers, and there's corruption there and stuff like that. And I'm not denying, there's some chicanery afoot. I still can't figure out for the life of me how this was quote unquote allowed to happen. My personal take is it's not Israelis. It's like the whatever their equivalent of a deep state maybe that might have instigated partially. I don't know what to make of it. That's just a conspiracy theory side, right? In other words, if there's corruption in the government, according to some of my colleagues who are pro-Palestinian, who basically, surprisingly, kind of sound like what I was saying about the conspiracy theory that there is the military-industrial complex is basically connected. Their tentacles are connected in all this, like high-ranking officials in both the Israeli government and the U.S. government, in the name of trying to make a profit one way or another, profiteer off this one way or another, right? That's I think the biggest theme behind, from what I've heard, the pro-Palestinian support. Just going that, and the fact that some others have claimed that there's been a massive systematic injustice and apartheid and everything else. And I can actually show you some of the conversation I had with a friend of mine where I said, I understand there's definitely a social unevenly yoked difference between how, as a generalization, the people in Gaza-Palestine were faring compared to individuals in Israel. But I couldn't help but notice, and this is stuff we've talked about in the previous shows, how much of this is solely due to Israel creating some sort of an economic chokehold deliberately to prohibit anybody from being able to get ahead. Is there any real proof of that? Or is it really just the whole, two cultures kind of grow up side by side. One of them just becomes way more proficient at just creating a very effective way of living economically that just creates more prosperity, where the other one seems to have more of a oppression, but partially due to their own government, to be fair. I mean, if we're going to be intellectually honest, Hamas isn't the most, pioneering of reaching better utopian levels of society for their people there. Am I missing something? Or?
No, once I believe it was in 2006 when they had the election and Hamas ran the government, there hasn't been an election in Gaza since.
Yeah, and it's just and I brought this up to my friends who are all pro-Palestinian, saying it's all Israel's fault. The thing that scares the crap out of me is how many people start to mistake, and this is where wording has to be very, very careful, because it's an easy slippery slope where they start saying it's all Israel's fault. And I'm like, do you mean the government under Netanyahu? Am I saying it right? I always get
Netanyahu.
Netanyahu.
That's okay.
Netanyahu,
You can say
and then maybe some sort of chicanery going on there within that branch of the government. But obviously, not everybody, not all the people of Israel are culpable for that, you know. But I have, and this honestly does concern me. I've seen a few more individuals that I've talked to who are just like, I feel nothing for. This is them saying, like, I don't really feel for the, I don't really sympathize for the Israeli plight right now, because of the decades of systematic injustice that they've incurred on to the individuals in Palestine. And I'm trying to reason with them and go, I don't think it's a one-sided affair here, man. Like, I think it's wrong to think that. And that's starting to get dangerously, should I say the word, anti-Semitic? I mean, you know what I mean?
Well, what we are seeing is on college campuses, which just in 2023, we are seeing that with some of our youth, and
jump on the bandwagon for anything that looks like a victimization.
That could be, or what some believe is some deep-seated anti-Semitic thoughts that now get to come out free and clear.
Well, if that's true, man, it's pretty ugly, because like I was really surprised. I was like, dude, I'm not liking where this is going. Yeah. It's like maybe you're misconstruing what you're trying to say, but the way you're going at it now, at this rate, you're starting to sound like the basically anti-Semitic. And I wasn't there back in the 30s, but I'm like, okay, I'm almost starting to feel like I'm living in the eaves of Nazi Germany's creation. If this keeps up, that's just crazy to me. I'm like, come on, study history here. To generalize anybody just because of the sins of a few individuals, first of all, is unwise, and it's intellectually dishonest. And I mean, it goes for any sides of like any population or any groups of individuals. It's the same thing as like lampooning everybody in Palestine is Hamas-loving supporters when they're, again, we talked about this a couple weeks ago, where there's a huge flood of individuals that were from Gaza-Palestinian that would actually economically just go back and forth over the territory and just work like in the Israeli side.
Yes, and they bring
they were doing all right.
back in the Gaza.
I'd like to hear more research and news on how they're feeling about this affair, because they also represent Gaza-Palestine. And if we're going to generalize and assume everybody from Gaza-Palestine feels that they were oppressed, then why don't we at least have that demographic within the Gaza-Palestine population voice their opinion? I think it's actually, it's just intellectually dishonest to generalize everybody and assume that they're the...
Well, supposedly the polling goes that those Palestinians in Gaza are 60 to 65% pro-Hamas.
60 to 65, but that would insinuate that 35% are... okay with how things were going.
Maybe not the way things were going, but were not in favor of Hamas running the government.
Okay. Your number one hub for learning about current events brought upon you in civilized, idyllic discussion. So if you like the show, hit a like, subscribe, and feel free to share any episodes.